The U.S. Supreme Court today heard arguments regarding Donald Trump's bid for criminal immunity and whether or not Trump can be tried on criminal charges that he conspired to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. We welcome back Roy Herrera, former U.S. Assistant Attorney and founding partner of Herrera Arellano LLP. All right, we asked you to stick around because we want your comments on this, because this is pretty big stuff. And is the Supreme Court moving fast? Or is it not moving fast enough for the prosecution? It seems like the timing of all this is at play.
Well, it somewhat depends. The answer to that question somewhat depends on what they decide to do after today. Because, for example, they could make a decision that will tell the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, who, I mean, if we sort of step back for a minute, we're at the Supreme Court because there is an underlying criminal prosecution of Donald Trump in the District of Columbia. He is arguing that he has some form of immunity from criminal prosecution because he was president. This is an appeal all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court about that. So if the Supreme Court comes back and says, well, you know, a former president has absolute immunity, that would just make the entire case probably just go away. But I think what is more likely is the Supreme Court is going to kick it back down to the trial court, find that there's some form of immunity, but have the trial court figured out the parameters of that. But either way, that is going to delay the prosecution such that we probably won't get a trial in that case this year at all.
And that would be a win for Trump, would it not?
Absolutely. I mean, part of his strategy in all four criminal prosecutions he's dealing with has been to delay as much as possible, certainly to delay past the election since he's running for office again.
And if he wins the election, he can just tell the Justice Department, you're dropping that case.
I think that's what a lot of people expect, that he would install an attorney general that would order the special prosecutor to stop the prosecution.
Okay, the idea, to what extent does an ex-president have presidential immunity? This has never been even broached before, has it?
It has not, and that's why this is such an extraordinary case. What we're thinking about here, or talking about here, is, you know, for a president who has certain conduct in office, does he have criminal immunity, essentially, for the rest of his life for those actions? We saw today that the justices seem to want to decide to grant some version of immunity for the actions of a president. But the question is, what are the parameters of that? So much of the discussion today was about, well, what's an official act versus what is a private act? A lot of the justices seem to think, well, it makes sense to provide some form of criminal immunity for official acts, but not for private ones. But the devil's in the details there, of course. What is an official act versus what is a private one? And that's what they were arguing about a lot today.
Yeah, interesting. And Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. And just the fact that he felt the need to pardon Nixon because Nixon would most likely have faced some sort of criminal trial somewhere along the line suggests that, does that not suggest that everyone pretty much assumed and has assumed and taken as you know, de facto law that you can be, absolute immunity, goodness gracious, you can do anything you want.
Well, that's what I think the liberal justices were arguing today. It was a very interesting sort of difference in philosophy on the effect of immunity. I think the liberal justices looked at it like what you were saying, which is to say that if you give immunity to presidents and they know that they will never be prosecuted post-presidency for any actions that they do as president, well, that's only going to encourage them to do things that are illegal, that they're going to do things that are some form of misconduct because they know they can get away with it. The conservative justices almost took the opposite view to say, well, if we don't give people immunity and they know that they can be prosecuted after they leave the presidency, then that is going to encourage misconduct because they know that their political opponents will just come after them after they leave the White House. So very different views on what immunity means by the justices.
And not only political opponents, you could have anyone who felt like they were wronged by the Justice Department or that particular administration going after that president.
Exactly, and that's the argument I think that Trump's lawyer made today, that it's only fair to grant this kind of immunity. Now, again, going back to the degree of things, I think Trump's lawyer today was asking for absolute immunity, so it really didn't matter whether it would be a private act or an official act, it would just be immunity across the board.
So he didn't draw, I mean, he didn't draw a line over a presidential coup.
Exactly. I mean, there was a question about that directly.
Yeah.
You know, what if the president decided he didn't want to leave office at all? And would that be an official act in which there would be some version of immunity? And the Trump lawyer seemed to say yes, that it perhaps would be an official act. And again, under his theory of the case, he would be immune. The president would be immune from any criminal prosecution later on.
As long as he were not impeached first.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the thing that they're... All right, real quickly again, because we're running out of time. Do you think the court's going to move quickly on this, or are they slow walking this thing?
Well, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about that. I mean, as far as the conservative justices slow walking this on purpose because they want the trial to take place later on as almost as a favor to President Trump. I think what is most likely, because there are a lot of details that need to be worked out between what acts are, what immunity, how far immunity applies to this, that he is going to, or the Supreme Court is going to kick it back to the trial court, have the trial court decide. But of course, when the trial court decides whatever the trial court decides, that's going to get appealed, and that's going to go back to the U.S. Supreme Court, extending this whole thing further.
Well, all right, then we'll ask you back then, Roy. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.